Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to season 2 of Conversations in Pop Culture, where I have with me comic creator Preston Poulter. Hopefully, I got the name right. So, welcome to
Yes.
the show.
Hello. Thank you for
Yeah,
having me on, Andrew.
yeah, I am very excited because you've done so much in
Thank
your
you.
entire career. I'm only going to be dealing with parts of it, and I'm going to try to get the name right because I think you've got a Kickstarter currently going on, and it's Guinevere and the Divinity Factor,
Yes.
and
Well,
also
almost. It's the Divinity Factory.
the Divinity Factory. Yeah, I stand
Correct.
corrected.
Yeah.
And also, you got stuff going on with Pocket Jacks Comics and a bunch of other stuff. So I think we should first start off with what is Pocket Jacks Comics and what type of comics you produce, because you got a
All
bunch of stuff going on.
right. Thanks. So that's my comic company, my private imprint, if you will. So that is the label that's putting out the Guinevere and the Divinity Factory story. Previously, last year I finished White Lily, the trade paperback, which was I had crowdfunded all 5 issues, and then I put the trade paperback last year. And it's the story of the 2 deadliest female fighter pilots that ever lived. And so we've done that and shipped it out. Some people love it. Other people, it's not their cup of tea, but it does well for me at comic shows. And I'm looking forward to those starting again. And then
So,
Guinevere.
so
Oh, go ahead.
let's talk about White Lily, because
Okay.
before we get into Guinevere and all that stuff and what's currently going on, White Lily is fascinating because it's about the 2 deadliest women in basically the Soviet Russia, fighter pilots.
Right. Yes.
And they have the most kills. One of them has more kills than the other, but they're the top 2. And then there's a bunch of other stuff going on, and we get glimpses into their life. And also we get a love triangle, and they also might like each other, and they also might like the same guy. And it gets super, super interesting because it is fascinating to read something that is on the other side of really the Cold War and what happened, and with Soviet Russia and fighting and them shooting down and that entire reign. And also it's women fighter pilots, and I don't know any other women fighter pilots out there.
Exactly.
I don't.
Yeah. When I first saw that story, I'm like, they had women fighter pilots. When
Right,
did
that's
that
my
happen?
reaction to it.
Yeah.
Right, like I'm completely shocked. Like I knew
Right.
nothing about this until I started researching. I'm like, wait a second, this isn't fiction. This isn't a historical fiction book. This
It
is
is
real.
historical fiction. I had to take some liberties. It's not a biography, but the significant elements of the story are based on history. She beat her dogfight instructor the first time. She was the first woman to score a confirmed kill. She was shot down a few times. She fell in love with her wingman, Alexei Solomate, and stuff like that. So.
Because it's super interesting, and I love the concept. And just to put this in perspective, this is what they essentially look like. Where I don't know which one it is, but obviously the black and white photo is her real appearance, and then this is the comic book, which looks like the comic. And so this is just super cool because they look so similar and it's so likeness.
Thank you. And we're starting work now. White Lily had some fans. Again, it's not an American story, and it's being, Eastern Front. Well, the Russians had a very different experience of World War II. It wasn't the
Was it the good old USA?
yeah. It wasn't the American. It was a different experience.
It was a
so many.
much harsher war for the
Right.
Russians. It was much more of a practical war for the Russians. Russia is a rougher country. Also, it was on their home front. The U.S. military, and I worked for 2 VSOs, which is Veteran Service Organizations, before where I'm at right now, which is in between jobs. So that's always fun. But we were on foreign territory throughout all of World War II. Russia was on their territory.
Right.
It's a whole different war experience.
Right. Exactly. So yeah, it wasn't the experience of kind of going off to a foreign land and fighting an enemy and then returning victorious. For the Russians, it was a battle for survival, as you put, on their homeland, and a lot of them died. And so White Lily, has this very heavy, kind of steeped in death sense about it. but some people, felt Lily was really compelling the way I wrote her, and we're asking like, well, is this going to be a sequel or something? Because when the story ends, it's very definitive, but people are like, well, maybe you could do like they like, maybe there's some material here, and you could talk about this period here to here. And what I've told them is I'm going to base a couple of characters off of Kat and Lilia in my latest story, which I'm calling Lords of Iron, which is going to be sci-fi Robotech. Actually, going over it's actually been more cyberpunk. I wanted to create like the hardest sci-fi reality ever. So like there's no faster than light travel. There's none of that stuff. Like the action's taking place here in the solar system. It's kind of like The Expanse. It's a fight over resources here in the solar system and a war between rivals. And I'm going to take Kat and Lily and I'm going to put characters based on them in this story. So if you liked White Lily, then you should like Lords of Iron, as well as Robotech.
I love Robotech. I'm a big Tony Oliver fan. I'm a Macross fan.
Well, there's a fair amount of Macross in White Lily. The story about people going up in aviation machines to fight the enemy, but there's all this personal stuff going on, and there's all this like who they like and their loyalties. And Macross also had steeped in kind of this World War II sensibility about just people are dying. At the end of the Macross story, it's kind of happy and that Rick and Lisa end up together, but they're standing in like the last outpost of humanity in a completely barren planet Earth. So, it's a dark story in that regard.
Well, we technically don't know where Rick and Lisa are right now, technically.
Right. Yeah.
In Robotech, we don't. So it's a whole complicated thing.
Right.
And Harmony Gold apparently has the rights to it, so we know we're screwed.
Well, just a couple of weeks ago, they actually announced a deal. I don't know if you've been following that.
I might have not seen it. So I'm the first person. It's not
so our Harmony Gold put out Robotech, which I really loved, as did a number of kids when I was growing up.
It's fantastic. I came into this like 8 years ago. Oh, great. Watched the entire thing in like 3 weeks. All 80 plus episodes.
Right.
Fantastic.
So Harmony Gold combined 3 different Japanese animes to make their storyline. And the most popular, I want to say, is, the first season, which was Macross. And then in Japan, there was more content that was being made for this popular show. But Harmony Gold had been given the rights to distribute Macross as part of their Robotech thing, and they didn't have an interest in the material that wasn't now Robotech canon. It was this other stuff. And basically the material just sat there. It got distributed in Japan, but if you were outside of Japan and wanted to see more Macross stuff, you had to get
so complicated to come over.
Right. So just like 2 weeks ago, and this has been 90s, aughts, 22. So this is like 20 plus to 30 years dispute. And just 2 weeks ago, Harmony Gold announced that it was going to distribute Macross worldwide. And that should be hopefully interesting. People might want to go and check out Macross as it's being distributed. I'm hoping to kind of break off a little piece of that with my sci-fi mecha anime, with the characters based on the 2 deadliest female fighter pilots who ever lived. So.
Yeah, and I love this entire concept. I love war comics. I love war anime. Mm-hmm. I love aviation. I love all that stuff in anime, and I love just everything that happens with this. And I also love the fact that it's based on something that's real, based on real people. I think it's really nice when we get actual stories, whether comic fans appreciate it or not, and some do, some don't. But I think it's super, super nice when we get this idea where, this is real. Jason Aaron's The Other Side is a very powerful book because it's dealing with Vietnam. Mm-hmm. And it gives you a real sense of what it's like to be on both sides of that war. Yeah. And what people are fighting for, and how like the American is trying to catch syphilis so he doesn't have to go. And the Vietnamese man is the only one who volunteers from his village, and he feels like he's fighting for the freedom of his country. And it's a very, very interesting approach. And I feel like that's very similar with this book, where we get these characters and they have that patriotism in them. And I think it's super awesome to just have a story like that. And I think they're super significant, and I think there needs to be more stories like that
Thank you.
out there.
Thanks so much.
And so I actually like this story so much, and I like the fact that it is 5 issues, and that you're now actually doing, I think, Iron. Wow, it's slipping my mind.
Lords of Iron, yeah.
Lords of Iron, and that it's gonna have characters that sort of have based off of some of these White Lily things, and obviously modified, but very similar vibe. I feel of this war and rivalry, because I love stories like that. And I think it's really smart. And I think people are also craving that because it's simple, but it's also complicated enough.
Thank you.
So yeah. So I'm very excited. And then the other thing about White Lily that I love is I love all the variants that you did with it.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I've embraced variant covers, as you know. But yeah, that's top left. That was a variant cover of issue 1, and then there's a main cover of issue 1, and then that's the main cover of issue 2, and then going down the middle, that was the a cheesecake. That was never a cover. That was just like a cheesecake print that I had Diana Greenhalgh's do. And then then we got the variant cover of 3, and then the variant cover of 2, and then down at the bottom that's the main cover of 3.
And so obviously I'm a cover guy. I love covers. I love covers from everybody. I'm a big Zenescope fan. I love Big Dog Ink, and I know that you're a fan of Big Dog Ink too.
I do like Tom Hutchinson. Yeah, he's a good guy, and I appreciate him, letting me take out covers of his comic books and sell his comic books. Because as a new comic creator, you need a fair amount of you need merch to sell at your show in order to make money. And when you're just starting out, well, what are you going to sell? And so Tom is neat in that he allowed me to buy a lot of his comics at wholesale, and then I had here's my stuff, and then hey, here's my friend Tom, stuff.
Yeah, and to talk about that, because I don't wholesale, and I'm doing phenomenal on eBay with Zenescope books, where I'm doing about 32% profit margins, which is amazing when I'm buying at retail price, and then I'm making that. If I was buying at wholesale price,
I feel like you should start. I don't know if I don't know if you're aware, and obviously Diamond has been in the news lately, but you can open up an account with Diamond for, I think, like $500 is like their minimum order. So you could buy Zenescope at wholesale and then increase your profit.
I might do that, or I might actually even buy it directly through them because I have some connections, and I got to interview Ralph Tedesco, who owns Zenescope. But that entire thing, and what I love about what you're doing is that, well, somebody's going to come and walk out and see you at a con or on your Kickstarter, and be like, oh man, I'm here for White Lily, I'm here for Guinevere, and then they're like, oh man, what does this thing look like? Oh man, this book looks awesome. Cool, I'll take that too. And what you're doing is something that I discovered on eBay, that I sell exclusively on eBay, for not exclusively, but I think 90% of my sales come from eBay, where I always ask my customers saying, hey, what do you want? What are you looking for? And then they tell me, and I feel like that's what you're doing with your Kickstarter and even on eBay, because I know you sell on eBay too. And so what is that like for you? Because somebody who's buying White Lily or buying Guinevere might also be interested in Tom's project, which is the Oz stuff, because they are very similar. And I think people say, oh man, I have a hard time finding books. One of the things about Barnes & Noble, they actually just canceled this policy, is that they used to have a policy that buy 2 books, get the third one free. And the reason why they canceled that is that people have a hard enough time finding 1 book, let alone 2 books, let alone 3 books they want to read. And they were finding that people were not interested in the promotion at all, because it's impossible. And I feel like you're solving part of that problem. So what is that like for you and getting into it? And also, I feel like you're delivering a lot of value by pairing up things and having them there.
I do my best. And people have variant covers kind of have a bad name, but as I like to say, it's really not variant covers that people dislike. It's really incentive covers. For me, here, I'll just show you. Like right now, over on Kickstarter, last 24 hours for Guinevere. So these are the 3 variant covers, and the books are already done. And it's the same book. So this is Paolo Pantalina's. He drew, and actually this came out of my writer's circle, which I will have to run away here in about 45 minutes and do my Wednesday Raiders group. But a guy who goes under the handle Mecha came up with this character who was a werebear, and I took his character and I put him in issue 4 of my story, and now he's inspired to go ahead and create the comic book. So we had Paolo Pantalina, and I only issue 150 copies of these, and so that makes them rather rare and collectible. And here's Matt Weldon's cover of issue 3, and I'm introducing officially a character known as the Great Wizard Gatsby, who's based on the Great Gatsby as wizard. And then here's the one that's really been selling well. This is the Two Worlds cover, because Guinevere looks pretty sexy, and you can never make her boobs big enough. So those are the 3 variant covers where I'm only doing like 150 of each. And this was issue 3. And this is what I call the main cover. So that meant the art team that did all the interiors did the main cover. And then there's like a nice 2-page spread here from the middle where the succubus is talking about her life. And for me, like, I look at comics and I'm like, all right, there's a value market there. They want the best comic they can get at the lowest price. And so for them, like, I'm like, okay, this book, my main cover is $10, and that includes shipping. And I think that's a pretty good deal. If you look at the interior art on the stuff, it's better than you're going to see.
It's for the person who wants the story and wants to read the comic.
Exactly.
And I hate to say this, and this sounds so messed up to some degree, but I'm a cover guy. I love covers. I love variants. I love artwork. And I don't read any of that cool stuff. Like, if I'm spending $40 for a cover, I'm not opening it. I'm staring at it because I view value, and I view that it's a commodity. And that's what I feel like with your 150 prints and even variant prints. And I buy a lot of Zenoscope stuff and even Tom's books. I'm saying, man, I'll read this thing digitally, but I am way more interested in how this cover looks, and I want to get it CGC'd and slabbed.
Right.
And that I mean, stop me at any point when I'm wrong. Please.
Yeah.
So
and that's what I was saying for the, if you're a value guy, then I'm offering, like I said, $10 delivered, and it's a good book. I figure like the value people should be happy, but the value market isn't what brings me the profit. It's the speculator market. And so for them, I'm like, I got big artists, limited print runs. It comes with a numbered certificate of authenticity. I'm really trying to provide as much value as I can for the speculator market.
And that gets you funded across the board so that you can then do a good story. And then you can then get across. And this is something that I think people on Kickstarter don't understand, is that who cares how you get your Kickstarter funded? I mean, it's nice that you want people to read it, but if your variants of 150 get you over the mountain and get you the ability to publish your book, then that's what got you over, and then your book still got published, and then you can then, after all the printing's done, then you can get that $10 book into the readers because now you're funded, if that makes any sense.
Sure. I mean, to me, and I explain this to people, I'm like, look, if you look at a book like this, there's an expectation that comic books should cost $5. And if, there's like 24 interior pages on this thing, this is a lot of art that had to go into this. This cost a fair amount of money. But meanwhile, if you look at like an art print, well, people have an expectation they're going to pay like $20 for that. And that's only one page. And the print cost on the print is like $1, whereas the print cost on a comic book is pretty sizable. So,
yeah,
as I explain to people, the reason why Artist Alley at all these comic book shows is just a sea of prints is it's because the marketplace has kind of standardized on a $20 price tag for a $1 print cost item that's 1 page worth of art. And they've standardized on a $5 expected price point for a 24 interior page book that's got a much higher print cost. Like you're never going to be able to make enough profit on that sale to really even be worth discussing. And so that's why I'm like, you have to change that kind of market and expectation, and limiting the amount that you issue seems like a good deal.
Yeah, and then it gets even crazier, and that's why variants go for good money, and that's the entire thing. And then also people have a different expectation, because when I buy a variant, I'm not caring what's inside the book. You can have blank pages
Right.
I'm expecting the book to be in nice condition. I'm expecting the art to say, damn, or oh my God, or catch my eye, or say, oh my God, I need this thing because this thing looks awesome. And so that's kind of the entire variant. And then obviously I like exclusive books. That's what I sell. You know, when there's a 250 print run and there's 1,000 people who want it, well, there you go.
Exactly.
So that's also an incentive, because then I'm looking at saying, okay, when I want to get rid of this, if I paid $25 for it, I want to get more than 25 for it. But if I have to take a loss on it, I can afford to take a $5 loss. And so that's how I view exclusivity, is that there's a floor and then there's not a ceiling. And that's a investment thing for me, because I'm also into traditional investing, and my entire thing is comic book investing. And so I love it, and I think Kickstarter is an awesome place to be for that. So
awesome.
I love it, and I love this stuff, and obviously I'm going to show some of this stuff. So obviously this is one of the variants. It's the Matt Weldon cover.
Matt Weldon, yeah.
And so that's $18, and that's a pretty cool book.
Which includes shipping, by the way.
So. And is there also a digital included in that?
No. So that's $18. You get that book delivered. If you want the PDF or issue 4, it's an extra $5. And my campaign embraces add-ons, and so there's an add-on. Right, there's an add-on. I'm like, hey, if you look, I'm really happy with add-ons. Kickstarter only came out with this feature like 2 or 3 months ago, I want to say. So it's fairly recent, but it allows you to go, okay, for fans who have known me for a while, you already have White Lily, so I don't need to customize a tier for it. But if you're a newcomer, you're like, oh, hey, that's a cool, I'll take the Werebear cover, and I like this fighter pilot story. Well, you can just add that onto your order, and then there you go.
And that's nice, because you don't have to do it manually.
Right.
And you can now just have it easily done, and somebody gets what they want, and they're thrilled about it. And then also, there's all this stuff digitally too. Obviously, I think might be the same cover, right?
Yes, that one is.
And then this is the other Two Worlds cover.
Yeah, everybody loves that one.
This is cool in that realm, where obviously she's got nice tatas.
She does, yes. Everyone draws her boobs so big. For Jamie Tyndall, if you actually go back to like Guinevere issue 3, the first cover, he did a naughty and a nice for me, and when he gave me something,
I have something of Tyndall in here somewhere.
Yeah, it's if you go down, then I think, or maybe not. No, I think there's an add-on that features all of the issue 3 variants. And anyway, so the nice cover came, and I'm like, can you take the boobs in a bit? And he's like, nobody ever says that. I'm like, I know, but I just feel like it's pretty good. And so he left them as they were for the nice one, but for the naughty one, he actually brought them in a bit. I'm like, and it sold really well. And well, I mean, also it was the naughty one, but I'll pull it up and show you. Just so the fast.
I'm going to get totally in trouble now. There goes my entire Facebook business.
There we go. All right, so here's. All right.
There goes my entire Facebook.
Yeah, there we go. There we go. So let me share my screen. Share.
And here goes my entire Facebook business.
There you go. I don't know what you mean. What do you? So this was the nice cover here, and as you can see, like the boobs were like they were large, but then for the naughty one, like I said, he kind of brought them in a little bit, and people loved that cover. That one sold really well.
And so obviously, I like Jamie Tyndall. Jamie Tyndall's been on this show, and I love what Jamie Tyndall works. And he's another one at a Zenescope. He does a lot of stuff for Zenescope, but he's been not in Zenescope for a little bit because he's been super busy. Obviously, he did Merc Mag and all that, and so that's super interesting and all the stuff he does. I love his work that's actually not naughty. I actually find not naughty covers to be sexier than naughty covers. Because I like leaving more to the imagination. I find them actually playful. And I'm a Zenescope guy, which is the problem, because they're like the naughty people.
They are, yeah.
They're the kinky motherfuckers,
They are,
and,
yeah.
and I love everything they do, and obviously I love it, and if people are buying it, I love it. I think
Although well, I got to, I'm horning in on Zenoscope's kinky action. I got mad street cred these days.
So I love it, and I love everything about this, and I love the cover art because I'm a cover guy. That's like what I do. That's my thing. I love staring at pretty girls and in great positions. That's why I love Big Dog Inc. I love what you're doing with these covers. I love all these artists and everything they do, and I also love that it's tasteful. That's the other thing, is that it's not smut. It's extremely tasteful, and it's also very fitting for these characters. And that's the other thing that I like about this, where it makes sense. It's not nudity for the sake of nudity. And I think that that's super important when you're running your Kickstarters and running your projects. And I think you do it very well, where it's not nudity for the sake of nudity.
I do my best. I mean, I do have to say, on the occasions where I'm like, all right, you know, for issue 3, I did a make 100 where I only issued 100, and boom, there it goes. And it was an adult version where you got to see the pierced nipples, and that one sold out really fast.
So let's talk about that, because that's also something interesting that you do that I haven't seen with other people either. And then I promise we're going to get to the story. I'm going to sell the story in a second here, because I do want to talk about that and not completely going, because usually we do this the other way, but we're switching it up because it goes that way sometimes. But one of the things that you do, and I think you launch your adult versions before you launch the mainstream. And it is more adult. It is extremely limited. That Kickstarter starts and ends, I think, or it ends maybe a week while the mainstream.
It's 1 week.
So that is super interesting, because obviously it helps to fund the book to some degree, I would imagine.
Yeah,
it helps.
I'm doing 2 campaigns instead of 1.
And also you're hitting different audiences. For instance, you know, there are people, I would imagine, that say, hey, look, I like what you do. I like this, but I'm not into that adult thing, or I don't want to pay that price tag, but I don't mind paying $28. I don't want to pay $58, for instance. And they're just not interested in that thing. And that's cool. And everybody has different, you know, things. Everybody has different economics. Look, if you got, you know, a 7-year-old around in your house, maybe you don't want to have too many adult things around. The 7-year-old can find it, per se. So what is that like, though? Because it definitely hits different audiences, and I also imagine that both of those funds come together to make everything work. And so what is that like?
Yeah, it's allowed me to raise the amount of money I get. Well, yeah, raise my sales for a given issue is what I should say. So, you know, with issue 3, I got to do 2 campaigns on it. With issue 4, this is the final campaign that is wrapping up tomorrow, and then I'm going to move on to book 5. But my thinking was, okay, like I said, I got my value price point. I'm like, I feel like the value customer should be happy paying $10 for a book, and like I feel it's like it's the best value in indie comics. I don't know anybody else who's got like the interiors that I have. I would love
very
to,
few. There's a short list. There's a short list.
Yeah, so like it's gorgeous interior artwork, and I'm offering it to you at a good price. So I'm like, okay, I feel like value customers should be happy. I'm like, what can I give the premium, the customer who's paying a premium? I'm like, well, what if I give it to him earlier? So that was the idea of the Make 100. Is I didn't offer the main cover value tier on like my first outing. I'm like, this is just for the select fans who want the stuff earlier. So I'm only going to issue 100, and typically, yeah, they tend to be like the more risque, adult-friendly versions of the story. Was what we're going to do for the Guinevere 5 Make 100. RB White has already turned in his work on that one. So
RB White is another person who did some early work for Zenoscope, apparently.
Yeah, I can see. I think I have his cover.
You're hitting all the Zenoscope crew.
I do my best.
Just running through them. Kane and White is next, right?
I've already solicited him.
Oh, he's fantastic. He is fantastic. Underrated, fantastic. So beyond underrated, but really fantastic. And obviously, we're doing this completely reverse order here, which I'm actually very, very happy about. I might just adapt this style moving forward. So I love it. But I definitely want to talk about the actual story of Guinevere because I think it is super, super interesting what's going on with it. It's got very much an Oz Gatsby feel to it. And pretty much she sort of is an addict. She gets healed by magic. And then she pretty much visits a mansion. And then she wants to be trained by a wizard. And then a bunch of shit happens. And basically, there we go. We're going to share this instead. We're going to table that for 1 second.
So that's R.B. White's version of Viviax, the succubus from the story. So there you go.
And so obviously that's awesome. I love it. I love it. It's so sick and it's so awesome. It's so demon-matic. I love it.
I think I think he does some pretty good work. I'm happy. I look forward to seeing how this one sells. So. And people just love the succubus. She entered the story just because she was selling so much merch without even being in the story. Like in issue 1 of Guinevere, there was just there's this brief time where she spends this one flash into the spirit realm, and there's like a succubus there. And I took that and I put it on a variant cover, and like everywhere I put the succubus, people bought it. I'm like, okay, I should
isn't it great capitalism? Isn't it wonderful that to run your book in a capitalistic way? Because that's what this is, and I love it, and I think it's brilliant, and I think more creators should do it. I follow the money in my eBay business, and I'm smart enough to understand that if I follow the money, that it's going to take care of itself. Because if I deliver to the people who want my stuff what they want, and then I ask them, hey, what else can I get you in this sector? Like, hey, man, you got this book, this book, this book, and then I give it to them, and they pay me for it. It's wonderful, and then I know what to buy more, and then I keep doing it, and it's great, and that's what it seems like. I love it. I love this.
Awesome. I'm glad.
So obviously we're talking about the succubus, and I probably mispronounced that because I can't speak today.
Yeah,
but I gave up a while ago. I understand when I'm defeated. I clearly know when I'm defeated. Obviously, I do want to talk about the story, and I was trying to explain the story, but what is the basic story for those who actually want to read the book and say, hey, I want that $10 mainstream value comic because I love comics. I love the way this thing looks. I love the fact that there's sort of Oz references and Gatsby references into this, and there's magic, and it's just a better version of Harry Potter.
Yeah, I mean, the story formed around, I did this like a movie producer first. I'm like, okay, so we're about to enter the 20s again. And I felt like there's a fair number of parallels between the 20s and the 20s we're in, because, the 1920s was a time that was great technological change. The automobile was suddenly allowing people to travel and bridge distances that previously, if somebody was in the next city, that meant you probably weren't ever going to see them very much. But, the automobile gave people a lot more mobility, and radio started to be this other new technology. And now people could start to consume mass media for the first time ever. And there was a lot of, women's kind of liberation, kind of sexual liberation in terms of flappers and this whole kind of loose morality party atmosphere. And for the first time, you had ticker symbols entering the popular lexicon because the stock market was booming. And this was now something that, again, for the first time now, common people were getting involved in the stock market, and they were starting to exchange stock tips as like, oh, hey, there was a Groucho Marx joke of, I doubled my money on AOT. And people were like, what's AOT? Any old thing, because the whole market was just booming at the time. And I feel like there's some parallels there with where we are, and that we're going to look back, and just because it's natural to do so, and go 100 years ago, what was going on? And, we've got this booming stock market. We've got, some of the same, sexual liberation issues in terms of the roles of society and stuff like that. So I'm like, all right, I want the 20s. Oh, and also Gatsby just entered the public domain. So I'm like, and I want him too. So I wanted a book that did all that from a sales point of view. I'm like, that would be a hot theme. And I just started going, okay, wait, what's the story going to be? So the very first con I ever did on the other side of the table was back in 2016, and it was Austin Comic Con. and I hired a local cosplayer named Juliet Kita to kind of be my booth babe and see if she could attract some people.
Smart move.
Yeah, and like I liked her look, and I appreciated it that she she showed up and worked, and I appreciated that. So she also is a nice person. She's married. She's very wholesome. She's not one of
Smut
the
driven.
yeah. She's not one of the weird fake sociopaths that you run into.
She's not
Sometimes.
one of the ones who has 1 million followers and forgot
Right.
her friends and
Yeah,
makes a lot of
exactly.
money and then is a bitch to every
Right.
other cosplayer coming up, because I know plenty of those and I've heard horror stories, but I'm not going to name names.
There you go. So I ran into her and I was like, okay, great. And I brought her, well, at least I got an agreement to use her likeness for the basis of Guinevere. And I cast her in a music video with her husband. And that was fun. So I made a music video, and you can see that over on my YouTube channel, as well as one of the reward tiers for the digital stuff is you actually get a download for the music video, so you can watch that on your phone or whatever in the privacy of your home. I don't know, but again, I was just like, what can I do? Because I've actually got a real woman that's looks like the comic book character, so that's Juliet. And I started to come up, okay, what story do I want to tell about her? And like people, oh well, one, all right, if you're for the people who are buying the adult covers, I feel like they have an interest in morally loose women, like I said, and that was one of the themes of the 20s. That's one of the main themes of Gatsby is, let's face it, Daisy's kind of a morally loose woman, as is we're following, I'm trying to remember who the narrator is, but he's involving himself with some women of questionable morality. So I'm like, I really wanted to follow uh, a story around someone who was coming from kind of a seedy background, and so that's how the story of Guinevere took place. Is she's like, all right, she's a woman who's got kind of a rough background as like a sex worker and a drug addict that she's trying to put behind her, and she learned a bit of magic, and so she's an apprentice and she's out for redemption in this and the succubus represents the kind of the spiritual entity that's attempting to corrupt her and tell her that you are this one thing that belongs in because to the succubus, she looks back and she looks at Guinevere as well as women in the same way like that you and I are discussing adult covers. You are a popular commodity that men will want to throw money at, and you can use that to control them, which is what a succubus does. And so she's out to corrupt Guinevere, and that's one of the main struggles of the story, Guinevere and the Divinity Factory. But there's also this sci-fi element which somewhat kind of sets the Lords of Iron story is an offshoot, because there's a lot of sci-fi metropolis, engineered society, and that was one of the other things. Like we had a lot of cool 20s fiction coming about. Brave New World was written about that time. 1984 was written only 20 years after. So a fair amount of good dystopian fiction, not to mention H.P. Lovecraft. So I just wanted a story that was just embrace a lot of these themes, and that's what Guinevere is doing.
And I love it, because obviously we're getting now into a lot of the thick stuff and the weeds and all that stuff that's going on, and dealing with her past, and all that stuff is coming about. And so it's super interesting, because now she's making choices and there's real consequences for her actions, and her past is coming up, and we're actually getting into the story, and we're actually seeing her now sort of evolve. And there is a lot of story here, going beyond the adult covers. That's something that I like also about this story in particular, is that there's a lot of stuff that, take away all the adult covers, it's a solid story.
Thank you.
And now that's what makes, I think, even the covers better, is that there's an actual story, and it's not just smut. It's not a loose-based story. It's pretty tight and it's pretty complicated. There's a lot of intricate parts, and she's going to have to deal with her past, sort of an issue for her.
Exactly. And yeah, so that is that's in issue 4. She has this showdown with Viviax, which sets up issue 5, and then you'll see where it goes. But that's the cover of Viviax for 5. It's been my best performing story so far, and I'm looking forward to seeing how like Lords of Iron is going to do. And that's the other thing that I'm doing, is that I'm doing these kind of discrete little stories where, okay, White Lily, then boom, we got trade paperback and Guinevere, and then we'll have a trade paperback for that, and then Lords of Iron. And these trade paperbacks are a nice price point in terms of, now I can compete again with like the $20 print. I'm like, oh, if you're gonna pay $20 for a print, how about $20 for this 160 page, full color trade paperback? It's
also you're competing at $20. It's reasonable competing with a Marvel book or a DC book as well.
Right.
There's a Kickstarter and they're asking like $25 for 48 pages. It's not a Kickstarter, it's on Indiegogo, and I'm like, what the hell? That's really, really expensive.
That was the Comicsgate standard model, was $25 for 48 pages. And unfortunately for most of those Comicsgate books, it was end delivered a year or two, or maybe never.
And I don't get it. And you know what it is? I don't think the story doesn't look that interesting. And I am completely baffled at who in their right mind would pay $25 for 48 pages, unless I'm missing something. Right. Because I'm staring at it, I'm saying, what the hell? Because at $20, or even if you were to charge me $30 on an indie book for 168 pages, I still think that's within reason. I don't like. I just backed a graphic novel on Kickstarter that is for $25, softcover graphic novel. Like, I find that, but it's a graphic novel that has over 100 pages.
Right.
Like, that to me is value for my money. Like, I just find that it's crazy. And also, I love graphic novels because people want to consume more content. I love sitting down for 3 hours and reading a graphic novel and like having my beer. And on a Friday night, or drinking my Jack and Coke and having my beer and enjoying it. Because that's what I enjoy. And so for me, that's kind of my thing. Because it's very relaxing. And that's what I like about graphic novels too.
Awesome.
So and I just love the fact that there's so much stuff going on in this book. There's something for everybody in Guinevere and what's happening with it.
And that's something else I realized, like, in terms of my writing style, and I'm gonna have to leave in like 20 minutes to go do my writing group. But every week over on my YouTube channel, people come and present scripts as well as me. I'm like, all right, here's what I'm writing. You give me your feedback on it. But just in looking at people's stories and reading over people's comic books, like the way I write it, I feel like no one's going to put my book down and feel like I was just kind of milking a few pages where not much was going on there just to put the book out. Like I'm not taking
that is important. I feel, where now people's attention span has gone massively. 7 seconds in a movie. Right. If something's not going within a movie, unless something's going to happen the next minute, and you're setting something up major, for the most part, but people's attention span is shit right now. And it's gone worse and worse and worse. And so obviously, I think it's super. Yeah. What were we saying?
Well, yeah, and in looking at a fair number of mainstream comics, and of course, look, I sympathize with mainstream comic writers because, we've been telling the Captain America, Spider-Man, Hulk, Batman story for decades, and the characters are never supposed to change. So I feel like a natural consequence is, well, of course you're going to have, 2 issues of content spread out over 6 or 7 issues of just like people talking and slowly movements and all this other stuff. But that's not the way I approach storytelling. For me, I'm like, I want like a lot of dynamic stuff to be happening. And if it's, if I write a scene and I'm like, there's just not a real conflict here that I like or is compelling, I'll just cut the scene. I'll be like, I can replace that with a line of dialogue somewhere. And that's how I approach things.
And even going further, because I think a lot of people now are saying, wait a second, I'm just sick of mainstream because it's the same thing. You can only tell so many times Peter Parker fighting Doc Ock.
Right.
You can only tell so many times Batman capturing the Joker. And even introducing a new sidekick. I mean, certain things with Punchline failed miserably because it was a big hype, and for a spec market, it's great. But Batman '89 is not a good issue. With all due respect to DC, not a good issue. The Joker War, really not that great in reality.
Mhm.
Batman Nightfall, when Batman Nightfall came out, that was new, that was fresh. I still think it's fresh. I'm rereading it. I find it more fascinating than half the stuff that's going on right now in DC because it's actually something significant is happening where this is the first time Batman's ever dealing with a real threat that's kicking his ass.
Mhm.
That doesn't happen so much in DC Comics, but I feel in indie comics, there are real consequences, even for people who are building big worlds and going and saying, hey, I want to do 30 issues. There are real consequences in each and every issue. And I think it's a big deal. And I think society is shifting. I don't know if indie comics as a whole can capture what Image captured about 10 years ago, where I think they took like 11 to 15% of the industry from Marvel and DC. But I think indie can capture, and I think they have, due to COVID, has captured like 5%. I think is a fair
Yeah.
assessment.
And I mean, Kickstarter and eBay and basically my sales and distribution model, which is not independent to me, but I think it's true to like the indie comics experience of people, working out of their homes and boom, here's my comic book offering that I'm going to share with the world. Kickstarter, to a lesser extent, Indiegogo gives you these wonderful platforms where people will come and they are willing to invest because if this creator continues to develop, well, then the books should appreciate in value. And meanwhile, as a creator, you get to, okay, I'm going to sell it on Kickstarter, and then I'm going to sell it on eBay, and then I'm going to sell it at shows. So I'm getting a decent sales volume. And meanwhile, I'm building fans. I'm getting, email addresses for the next Kickstarter campaign, and the whole thing is working. Whereas the traditional comic book distribution model of
There's a lack of connections to
yeah,
fans.
right. There's that. And also, I mean, going back to what we were talking about, half an hour ago, there's that same problem of the expectation for a comic is $5. And if you're going through a distributor, that means you have already given away half of that. And so now you're just fighting over like pennies. Whereas if I'm able to do the sale myself on eBay, I'm able to, realize a much more profitable transaction. So I think the indie comic space will continue to grow in part because there's not really much of a middleman between the comic book creator and the comic book customer.
Yeah, and I also think that especially in volume, the more volume you have as an indie comic creator, if you know that you can
Oh
sell
yeah.
10,000 books, that price goes down significantly. I was speaking to Comic Distro, and I did one of their first interviews, and they are trying to get indie comics into shops through print on demand, which is a very interesting model, and they have a very interesting battle plan. And I think that if they can be successful and they could actually build in shops and get some big name shops in, they might be the answer. They might be one of the answers to get, indie books into shops, especially with Marvel and DC, going their separate ways out of Diamond and the other stepping up now into Diamond. It's a whole interesting ball game with that. And so obviously the future of Kickstarter is going to be super interesting. And so I'm curious how you view the future of Kickstarter, because I think you answered part of it all.
I think it's growing, and I'm happy to grow with it, and that's awesome. For me, like I said, I look at this as I want to try and get to the trade paperbacks because now I've got the $20 price point, and if I can print enough of them, then my print cost is going to be fairly low so that I'm making a decent amount of profit on the sale. I'm now making enough profit on the sale that I can wholesale it. I can give away half the profit to somebody else, kind of stuff. So that's good. And so I want to get to the trade paperback thing. Meanwhile, Kickstarter, eBay, and the shows allows me to make the floppies what they truly should be, which is the more kind of highly collectible piece that the real fans who have been following you get to get rewarded for. They get to spend the money on, like $18 for that Matt Weldon cover, one of only 150. Well, when I get to Guinevere, beyond issue 5, which is only going to be like 6 months from now, and then I get the trade paperback, I won't need any more Guinevere floppies. So all the floppies I did for Guinevere, I'm like, okay, that's now out in the world. If you happen to get one, awesome. I've got the trade paperback, and now I'm going to march on to the next story. And I think that provides a real value for the dedicated fan and the collector. And I just feel like it's working, and it's more exciting than the more traditional local comic book store model.
Yeah, and obviously, I mean, I think the collectible Kickstarter stuff is very new in its infancy. I think mainstream variants are going to be copied on Kickstarter, but I even think that not reproducing that in exclusivity, where I don't like Kickstarters that say whoever orders these variants, I'll print as many as needed. I think limiting something to 100 or
Right.
200 or 50 is super, super important. Because I think that's what I think gets me excited and makes it a commodity versus saying, hey, if 400 people order cover B and it's a variant, I'm going to print those.
Right.
That's not really that exciting to say, or saying, well, I'll print those, and then for the next Kickstarter, I'm not going to print any more of cover B. Like, still though, you printed a lot of cover Bs, and every cover B you print diminishes my rate of return. It's kind of like, Zenoscope did something where they had a Zen box, and they increased it from 150 to 200. Those 50 extra books affects my value of sale. Right. So that's an issue. But and I know you got a hard deadline, so I got two more questions.
Okay.
I promise 2 more questions, and hopefully they're not going to be long questions. Right. Obviously, I want to talk about COVID because you've done shows. This has been the year of no shows. Obviously, shows are starting to come back, and they're not going to be the same. I think that's a safe assumption. There's a lot of unknowns, I think, is also a safe assumption. So what do you think cons are going to look like? Where do you think they're going? And what do you even think just the future of a con and selling and all that stuff looks like?
All right. One, I wish some of the comic book show organizers were a little more aggressive. But, like I understand, for them, if they're not going to sell a lot of tables and they're not going to sell a lot of tickets, they don't want to have a show. But meanwhile, here in Dallas, there's been a sports card guy, and he's been doing shows, and I've sometimes gone and done a sports card show to sell comic books. And, I've done pretty well.
Those are the best. Those are the best. I've been to sports that are sports and comics. Phenomenal. Yeah. Best deals in the biz.
Right. So, when I was going to these sports card shows selling my comic book store, there were people who were just excited to be out and seemed excited to spend money. And so I think when shows finally come back, and I'm doing my first, with the guy who organized the sports card stuff, he's got a show here in May. And then when we get to June or July, now we're starting to do more regular comic book shows. So I feel there's a lot of pent up demand, and I expect to do pretty well. I'm gonna choose to be optimistic.
Yeah, I'm optimistic too, and I'm hoping for the best. And I just moved to Connecticut, so I got to get refamiliar with my territory of going places. And the way I view it is that I just think that it's going to be very much experimental for a while until things sort of get normalized. And so that's how I view it. It's going to be trial and error on what works and what doesn't. I think it is a safe assumption. And then the final thing I want to do is I want to give you an opportunity to self-promote, because I know that you got like 24 hours left on your Kickstarter. And obviously I want people to back it. I don't know how much is left on everything per se and variants. And if there's certain covers that have like 5 left, you should probably let people know so they buy them quickly.
No, it's so far there's going to be plenty of all the covers left over. So
you're not supposed to tell people that. You're supposed to be like, there's 3 left.
I'm not going to lie to them. But wait, you know what? Here, I'll show this. This might be kind of neat.
There's 3 left of each. Hurry up, everybody! Buy!
I did a lenticular cover this time around.
And those are fun. I like those.
Yeah,
I like metal covers too.
Hold on, let me show it to you.
I love lenticular. I love metals. Metals are cool. Because I know you got metal trading cards also.
I do. Yeah. So this is the lenticular cover. That's Viviax and Guinevere, and she goes from being bound by chains to breaking free and casting a spell, depending on how the light's held. And that's only $20. So that's available as part of the Kickstarter, which does end in 24 hours. And look, I'm not gonna lie, be like, oh no, we only got it. I printed up 150. by this time next year, those will all be sold out. Probably by this time in like 3 months, those Halo 2 Worlds covers will be sold out because that was been really popular. Yeah.
So something to add, and correct me if I'm wrong. This stuff is going to be at shows. When you go back to shows, it's going to be up on your eBay store, and there's going to be better deals on Kickstarter, from my understanding.
Yeah, I mean, I'm offering people bundling discounts. You know, Kickstarter, I can't do the whole field of parts and SKUs the way I can on eBay. So for people who are like, I want the one specific cover from issue 3, I'm like, just go to my eBay store and buy it there, because I don't want to list out when you're doing multiple variants. And now you're like, you're going to be 5 issues into the Guinevere series. I'm like, okay, if you want the specific variant on one, then, you know, like the eBay store. Meanwhile, like at Kickstarter, just make it easy. Like if you want a variant cover package, so I give people a bundling discount to get all the variants for 3, or, you know, all the, yeah, exactly, all 6 covers. This Whiskey Paint, I love his work. He did one of my most successful books, which was White Widow issue 4. And he did a pretty sexy cover that I'm going to sell out of in a couple of months, and I'm looking for the next one. So I hope that lenticular cover does pretty well for me. But yeah, I issue a certain number. I offer them first on Kickstarter. Then I'm going to put them on eBay. I'm going to put them on shows. And when they sell out, they sell out. And people, you know, like there's a lot of people who are like, I want to invest in a business, or I want to sell stock in my little publishing company. I'm like, variant covers, in my opinion, are better, because if you invest in a new publisher in terms of stock, how are you going to sell that stock? Whereas, you know, if you're limiting down to just these very few books, the people who are investing should be able to see that value appreciate if the company and the publisher continues to do well. So I view them essentially as kind of like,
it even goes further, where if you bought, you know, an early eBass, and I'm picking an artist that you haven't worked with, or I don't think you've worked with eBass yet, for a reason, where if you bought an early eBass or an early Jamie Tyndall, those books go for good money now.
right.
And so if all of a sudden Whiskey Paint, you know, I don't know how deep Whiskey Paint is, but, you know, 10 years down the road, that might be worth more. I have held on to books from different publishers with people's early on careers, and they've done very well. So that's something to keep in mind as well, where it's not just the publisher, it's also the artist. And you might catch an artist who's brand new and then they get red hot. Derek Chu is a good example of that. So keep that in mind as well. And just to add to all that, and then the final thing I want to talk about is, obviously, I want to give you an opportunity to promote yourself. Obviously, 24 hours. So where can people find you? Super important. Where can people find your Facebook pages? I know you have a big following on Facebook. I know you do a YouTube show. Obviously, you got something, I think, that's live right after this, or it might be pre-recorded, or it might be private. I don't know.
It's live, yeah, with a bunch of writers. We've come on and looked at each other's scripts. So I'm Pocket Jacks Comics. That's my Twitter handle is Comics Jacks. But if you look for Pocket Jacks Comics, you should be able to find me. You know, Kickstarter, my eBay store. Honestly, those are like the 2 biggest things. I'm like, if you're really focused on like the comic books, just follow me on Kickstarter, make me your favorite seller on eBay, and you're going to see the stuff I'm offering.
And so obviously that's where you should follow. Again, I've been saying this, it's super important. You have to support indie. What that means is that you have to support economically. So obviously back to the Kickstarter, if you like what you heard, you like what you saw, bunch of cool stuff. I showed a bunch of covers. Obviously, you get everything that we spoke about, as long as it's still available. And that's one way how to do it. And let's say that you are like, hey, you notice I really like some of this stuff and you want even more of it. Definitely check out the eBay store, because there's a bunch of cool variants up on eBay. Also, there are better deals on Kickstarter right now that are not going to be on eBay. Right. I know you've made that clear. So if you like those metal cards, for instance, it's probably a better deal on Kickstarter. So obviously that's one way how to get a bunch of stuff. And so clearly that's for starters. And then let's say that you want issue 3 variant D of Guinevere, and eBay is the place to go. And look, if you like some of the stuff, even after the Kickstarter, eBay is the place to go. So obviously, definitely that's another way how to support indie comic creators. So keep that in mind. And let's say money's tight right now, because COVID has done a lot of damage to people. One of the things that you should do for starters is that obviously you should like the Facebook page. You should follow on Twitter, Instagram, any social media. Obviously eBay, favorite seller. Anybody you like on eBay, you should make them your favorite seller. And then you should also make the person your favorite creator and follow them on Kickstarter. It's super helpful because then you'll get notified of everything. But you should be sharing the Kickstarter to people. You should be pushing it out there. You should be liking it. And you should be, you never know when someone say, oh man, this is awesome. I have to back this because I love this cover. And if you know somebody who likes Gatsby and the Wizard of Oz and the 1920s types of vibe, just send them in a Facebook Messenger because you never know who's going to back it. I'll also let them know that it's 24 hours as well. So super important. And on that note, oh, and also go to the YouTube channel right after this thing for those watching because fun stuff's going to happen live and you're going right into it pretty much. Yeah. So on that note, I'm going to give you the final word. I'm going to let you go straight into your writer's room.
Thank you so much for having me on, Andrew. I really appreciate it. And, you know, over the last couple of weeks, I've been applying for and starting to pay for all the shows that I'm going to do this year. And I'm just so excited to finally get out of the house and get back out there. And I've got a lot more product to sell now than I did when COVID first started. And I'm just curious to see how it's going to, well, I'm excited. I'm excited to see how it's going to do. So.
And we're excited to buy your product. And I'm hoping everybody's going to buy your product. And
me too.
All my listeners, obviously go check out that writer's stuff going on. It will make you a better writer. And I'm going to let you go on that front.
Thanks so much. All right. Thank you so much, Andrew. Take care.